A car sitting in 115 degrees sun, 115 degrees, reaches 165 inside within the first hour. That is not an estimate. That is what the thermal studies confirm, and it is hotter than your kitchen oven on the warm setting. In Maricopa County, Arizona, in 2023, 645 people died from heat. Not from exposure to some rare disaster, from heat, from the ordinary summer air. And I'll tell you what the news doesn't say right after that number. There were thousands of people living outside in that same county, in that same brutal summer, who didn't die. No power bill, no window unit, no generator humming in a parking lot. What they had was a system, cheap, invisible, and built on physics that costs nothing to understand. That system is what this video's about. Stay with me. If heat is the thing bearing down on you this summer, do yourself a favor and subscribe. This is the channel that keeps you cool without a power bill. I spent more years sleeping in vehicles and on pavement than I'll comfortably say out loud. I know what a sealed car smells like at 4 in the afternoon when the sun has been cooking it since 9 in the morning. I know what it feels like when the door handle burns your hand before you even get inside. I am not here to tell you it's easy. I'm here to tell you what works. The thing everybody reaches for first is the portable air conditioner. Walk into any big box store in June, and they're right up front. Portable floor units, window units, $300 to $600 depending on which one you grab. And I want to be straight with you, because honest is the only thing I know how to be. If you have a grid connection, a wall outlet, a shore power hookup, a window unit works. A 5,000 BTU window unit at $150 will drop a room to 72 degrees and hold it there all summer long. That's a real thing. I'm not going to stand here and pretend otherwise, but here's what the price tag doesn't say. That unit draws 500 to 1,000 watts. It needs a 120-volt outlet. It needs a window kit that tells anyone walking past exactly who's living inside. And if you're in a vehicle, which is where more people survive extreme heat than anyone likes to count, there is no outlet. Running the engine for air conditioning costs $5 to $10 a day in gasoline. It violates anti-idling ordinances in Phoenix and Los Angeles, across most of California, and the noise and the exhaust tell parking enforcement everything they need to know about what you're doing in that spot. You'll have a knock on the window long before midnight. The system that kept people alive in Phoenix last summer didn't need an outlet. It needed physics. Heat moves 3 ways: conduction, touching something already hot; convection, hot air moving over your skin; and radiation, the sun driving straight through your glass and the asphalt beneath you radiating back up from below. A commercial air conditioner attacks convection. It cools the air you're breathing and pumps hot air outside. That's real work. But it ignores the biggest problem, which is where the heat is coming from in the first place. Think about a greenhouse. Glass lets sunlight in, short wavelengths, they pass right through. But once that light strikes something inside and turns to heat, it can't get back out. The long wavelengths are trapped. Your car's windshield does the same thing. Sun blazes in, heats the dashboard toward 200 degrees. That heat radiates into every cubic inch of air in the cabin, and the glass won't let it leave. Interior temperature keeps climbing even after the sun moves, because the car has already stored it like a battery charging in reverse. Now, cover that glass with something silver and reflective, and the light never gets in. It bounces off before it ever becomes heat. You haven't fought the heat. You've refused to let it through the door. That's the principle behind everything in this video. Not removal, interception. The expensive way to beat 115-degree heat is to fight what's already inside. The cheap way is to not let it in. The cheapest move you can make is also the one most people do halfway. They put a folding reflective shade on the windshield and call it enough. That shade is doing real work. A quality reflective shade on the windshield alone can drop interior air temperature by 20 to 25 degrees compared to no shade at all. The Elite has tested this. The mechanism is straightforward. The windshield is the single largest solar entry point on any vehicle, and blocking it at the source is worth more than anything you do after the heat is already inside. But the windshield isn't the only glass. I've been in parking lots in the middle of July and watched people put their folding shade up and then sit in a car with full sun blazing through the driver's window and the rear glass. You're fighting the biggest fire with a bucket of water while 2 other rooms burn. Cover every window. That is the move. A pack of 4 emergency Mylar blankets costs $4 to $6 online or $1.25 each at Dollar Tree. Mylar reflects 90% or more of incoming solar radiation. Cut them to fit your windows. Tape them with painter's tape or clip them to the window edges, silver side facing out. A vehicle with full Mylar coverage on all glass sits in a completely different category than the same vehicle uncovered. I've cut Mylar to fit a windshield with a pocket knife in a parking lot at first light before the heat woke up. 5 minutes. Costs less than a fast food breakfast. On a 115-degree day in the desert, that 5 minutes is worth more than most people understand. The folding commercial sunshade from Walmart runs $12 to $18, and it looks like every other windshield shade in every parking lot in America. Nobody looks twice. That's the stealth point, and it matters more than it used to. After the Supreme Court ruled in Grants Pass versus Johnson in June of 2024, a real case, 6-3, cities across this country accelerated anti-camping enforcement: Phoenix, Las Vegas, Los Angeles. The court said municipalities can fine you $295 for sleeping outside with a cardboard box, even when no shelter has space for you. Being invisible isn't paranoia, it's the rational legal response to a system that punishes visibility. Notice what all of this has in common. Every method here stops heat from entering, not fighting it after it's inside. Your grandparents knew this. They called it drawing the curtains in the afternoon. Every farmhouse in America before air conditioning closed its shutters at noon and opened them at dusk. The principle is ancient. We just got sold a machine to do the fighting instead. Where you park matters almost as much as what you cover. Asphalt on a 115-degree sunny day reaches 150 to 175 degrees at the surface. Arizona State University's urban climate research has documented this across the Phoenix metro. Shaded asphalt drops toward ambient. Shaded dirt or grass comes in around 85 to 100 degrees. And there is radiant heat rising off that pavement into your floor, whether you can feel it consciously or not, cooking the bottom of the vehicle, which cooks the cabin, which is where you're sleeping. Shade under a highway overpass above baking concrete is not the same as shade under a tree over grass. The air temperature might read the same on a thermometer. The radiant load is not even close. Find the grass, find the canopy. Position the cab of the vehicle into the shade, not the engine compartment. The engine generates its own heat. The cab is where you live. Sun tracks west in the afternoon, and shade moves with it, which means you may need to move with it. This is free. It costs exactly as much as noticing which side of the street the shadow falls on at 2 in the afternoon. For the heat that's already building in your body, you need the wet towel. I know it sounds simple. Simple is not the same as wrong. Your carotid arteries run close to the surface of your neck. They carry blood from your heart up to your brain and back. Soak a bandana or a strip of t-shirt in water, drape it across the back of your neck, and you are cooling blood that circulates to every part of your body. The military has protocols for this exact technique. Sports medicine uses it. It works because evaporation pulls roughly 540 calories of heat from every gram of water that evaporates off your skin. In Phoenix, at 115 degrees with humidity below 20%, the air is starving for moisture. It pulls water off that wet towel aggressively. That evaporation is pulling heat off you at the same time. A wet cotton bandana re-wetted every 20 to 30 minutes keeps your core temperature measurably lower than nothing at all. A commercial PVA cooling towel, Frog Togs at $5 to $8 at Walmart, holds more water than cotton and releases it slower. You get 45 minutes to an hour per wetting in dry desert heat. Here's the one thing I need you to hear about where you're living, and I mean this seriously. In humid air, Florida, coastal Texas, the Southeast, anywhere humidity is running above 60%, this method loses most of its power. The air is already near saturated with water vapor. It can't pull evaporation off your skin efficiently. You feel the wet towel and it helps a little, but not the 15 or 20 degrees you'd get in Arizona. If you're in Tampa in August and you think a wet towel is as good as it is in Phoenix, you are underestimating your danger. Know where you are. Know what the air can do for you. Water access to re-wet that towel, McDonald's, Walmart, any public library restroom. Outreach workers in Phoenix document people refilling bottles and re-wetting cloths in public restrooms throughout the day. It is not a trick. It is a documented survival practice used by thousands of people in a county where the heat kills. The 2021 Pacific Northwest Heat Dome is the case that put numbers on what happens when a region has no system for this. June 25th through the 29th, 2021. Portland, Oregon hit 116 degrees. Seattle hit 108. Those are not desert cities. Those are places where houses were built without air conditioning because nobody thought they'd ever need it. The Oregon Health Authority confirmed roughly 600 deaths in that event. Washington State added roughly 200 more. British Columbia added 500 more across the border. The cooling centers that existed were overwhelmed and turned people away. That was documented in the state reports afterward. The people who made it through the worst days of that heat dome were the ones who already knew how to manage extreme heat with minimal resources, not because they were tougher, because they had already worked out the system. The build that pulls everything together is what I call the bucket cooler, and it cost me less than $25 the first time I put one together. Standard 5-gallon bucket with a lid, the white HDPE kind from Home Depot, $6 or $7. A small 6-inch USB or battery fan, $8 to $12 at Walmart. 2 3/4-inch PVC elbows from the plumbing aisle, $1 or $2 each. A utility knife you probably already own. A 10-pound bag of ice from any gas station or Walmart, $3 to $5. The build is simple. Cut 2 circles in the lid of the bucket and push a PVC elbow into each, angled outward so they direct air where you aim them. Cut 1 circle in the side wall of the bucket near the top and mount the fan there facing inward. It pulls air in through the fan, forces it through the ice inside, and the cooled air comes out through the elbows. Put 10 pounds of ice in the bucket, seal the lid, turn on the fan. The air coming out of those vents runs 20 to 30 degrees below ambient in dry conditions. At 115 degrees outside, you're getting 85 to 95 degree air out of those vents directed at your face and neck. That doesn't sound like cool air until you feel it 6 inches from your skin, and you understand that the evaporation it's pulling off you is dropping your felt temperature even further. Pointed at your neck in the cab of a vehicle, in the dark, on a night you'd otherwise lie awake sweating. This is the difference between sleeping and not sleeping. A small USB fan at 5 watts runs on a 10,000 milliamp hour power bank for 8 to 16 hours. No generator, no engine running, no exhaust. The only sound is the fan, which is quieter than a conversation at distance. You could be parked 20 feet from another vehicle and nothing gives you away. A 10-pound bag of ice lasts 3 to 4 hours at 115 degrees in an uninsulated bucket. In a Coleman Extreme Cooler, $35, that same bag goes twice as long. That's the upgrade path if ice is your ongoing cost. Ice runs $3 to $5 a day. Monthly, that's $90 to $150. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's nothing. It's real money for people who are already stretched thin. If ice isn't an option, put a soaking wet cloth inside the covered bucket instead. In Phoenix, at 15% humidity, a wet cloth in a closed bucket with a fan moving air through it still provides real cooling. Not 20 degrees below ambient, but 10, maybe 12 on a good night. In Houston, at 90% humidity, it doesn't. Know your climate. Know what tool fits it. Notice what none of these cost in terms of ongoing infrastructure. No installation fee, no service contract, no electricity bill. The methods that kept people alive in the summer that killed 645 people in one county are not locked up in some HVAC technical manual. They are physics, and physics belongs to everyone who understands it. Your ancestors built houses around these same principles, thick adobe walls that stored the cool of the night and released it slowly through the afternoon. Underground root cellars where the earth holds a steady 75 to 80 degrees year-round, regardless of what the surface does. The street figured out the same physics without the technical vocabulary. Here's the part I want you to sit with. The American HVAC and cooling equipment industry is a $50 billion a year business. The business model requires grid-connected, permanently installed systems that need servicing, need electricity, and generate ongoing utility bills at the highest margin pricing those companies sell. Arizona Public Service, APS, the largest electric utility in Arizona, charges 29 to 35 cents per kilowatt hour during peak summer demand hours. That's 4 to 9 in the afternoon, the hottest part of the day. That's when you need cooling the most. That's also when it costs the most. Nobody sat in a room and decided to let poor people die in the heat. I want to be clear about that. This is not a conspiracy. But if you designed a system optimized to make the problem invisible rather than solved, if you funded enforcement of anti-camping laws instead of funding overnight cooling, if you build cooling centers that close at 7 in the evening when many people are just arriving, that don't allow pets, that sometimes require identification, that offer no place to store the cart that holds everything you own, you would get exactly what we have. 645 deaths in a single county in a single summer. Cooling centers open, officially, turning people away in practice. The National Alliance to End Homelessness has published analysis documenting that these centers are systematically underfunded and inaccessible to the people most at risk. A $7 Mylar pack and a $25 bucket cooler are not a threat to any industry. What they are is something those industries never found it profitable to teach you. The profit was always in the unit, the outlet, and the monthly bill. Not in the physics that gets you through the same night for free. It was available to you the whole time. You just weren't the customer worth teaching. Now I need you to stop and listen to me for a minute, because this part is not optional. Your core body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That is 37 degrees Celsius. Heat stroke begins at a core temperature of 104 degrees. That is 40 degrees Celsius. Death risk rises sharply at 107.6 degrees. That is 42 Celsius. Between alive and dying is a window of 9 degrees in an environment that is actively trying to add heat to your body every second. When heat stroke hits, the sweating stops. That's the sign. You've been sweating heavily for hours, and then suddenly the skin is dry and hot and red, the pulse is fast and strong, and the thinking goes sideways. Confusion. Difficulty speaking. Possible unconsciousness. That is a 911 call. I am not going to be the man who gets you hurt because I wanted to keep this video moving. Heat exhaustion comes first. Heavy sweating, cold and clammy skin, fast but weak pulse, nausea, muscle cramps. That's your body telling you to get somewhere cool and drink water right now. Heat stroke is what happens if you ignore those signs and stay put. Hydration. At 115 degrees, you are losing 1 to 1.5 liters of sweat per hour. Thirst is a lagging indicator. When you feel thirsty, you are already behind. Drink before you're thirsty. This is not advice, it's physiology. If you cook inside a vehicle, and people do because sometimes they have to, any combustion of any kind runs with windows open on two opposite sides of the vehicle. Propane inside an enclosed space produces carbon monoxide at concentrations that can be lethal in 20 to 30 minutes. It has no smell. You will not feel it coming on in any way that wakes you up. A kitty carbon monoxide alarm runs about $20 at Walmart. Battery-only models exist. That $20 is the most important purchase on this list if you cook or heat inside a vehicle. Full stop. Do not use dry ice in the bucket cooler. Dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide. In a sealed vehicle while you sleep, it builds CO2 concentrations that become dangerous. Regular bagged ice only, cubed or crushed. That's it. Leave a gap. Even with full Mylar coverage, your body generates heat and CO2 through the night. Leave at least one window cracked a ½ inch on the downwind side. Passive air exchange. 1 inch of gap does more than most people think. I've seen the videos telling people to spray water directly into the car's cabin or mist the interior air to cool it down. Don't. The evaporation effect at 115 degrees is marginal on air you've already been breathing, and you're building mold in the upholstery and risking electrical shorts. Spray the water on your skin and on a cloth against your neck. That's where the evaporation does real work. I've heard people say cracking the windows is enough. It is not enough. Cracking windows in still air reduces interior temperature by 2 to 8 degrees. On a day when the interior has reached 165, 2 to 8 degrees is a gesture. The folding sunshade reduces it by 20 to 25. There is no comparison. One more thing, and I'll say it once. If you've seen anyone suggest covering windows with black material for privacy, spray paint, black plastic sheeting, anything dark, that is the opposite of what you want. Dark surfaces absorb radiation. Reflective silver surfaces reject it. Black is a heat collector. Mylar is a mirror. The difference between those two choices in a car sitting in July sun is not a small difference in comfort. It can be the difference between waking up and not. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking vent air at 85 to 95 degrees in a car at 115 doesn't sound like the word survival. It sounds like slightly less miserable. And you want to know if this is enough. Here's my honest answer. These methods reduce heat load. They don't eliminate it. If your core temperature hits 104 and you're confused, no bucket of ice saves you. You need medical help and you need to call 911. What these methods do is widen the gap between you and that threshold. They buy time. They make nights survivable that would not have been survivable otherwise. The goal is to not need 911. But knowing when to call 911 is part of the system, and I'd rather you be sharp enough to make that call than too far gone to know you need it. To the viewers watching from Florida, from coastal Texas, from the Gulf states, the evaporative methods lose their edge in your air. The wet towel still helps. The shade and Mylar still help. But the bucket cooler with real ice becomes your primary tool in humid heat, not a nice addition to it. Build it. The physics still works. It's just running on ice instead of evaporation. Now, here's what I promised you at the start. I told you to stay to the end because the last one was the one that changes the night. Here it is. The bucket cooler gets you through a hot afternoon. The upgrade that makes it work through the night, the one that converts the build from useful to genuinely livable, costs $8 to $12 more and takes about 10 minutes. Flexible ducting. The kind from Home Depot in 3-inch diameter, sold by the foot or in 4-foot sections. Take the PVC elbow vents out of the lid and replace them with 4 feet of flexible duct each. Now that cold airflow isn't just blowing out into the cab, it goes exactly where you direct it. Run it along the floor and aim it at your sleeping bag. Aim it at your face where your head rests. The cooled air that was diffusing and rising and mixing with the ambient heat of the vehicle is now a directed stream running across your body from the moment you close your eyes until the ice runs out. I clip mine to the headrest adjustment knob at the back of the seat, bent so the opening sits about 8 inches from my face when I'm lying down. Cold air is heavier than warm air. It pools low. You're sleeping in the coldest layer of air in the vehicle. On a night that would have been brutal, that is how you sleep. $8 to $12 on top of the original $25. That's the whole system. So here's what I'd do before the sun comes up tomorrow. Get Mylar on every window, silver side out. Find the shade and position the cab into it, not the hood, the cab. Wet a bandana and put it on the back of your neck. Build the bucket if you have the $25, and if you don't, put a soaking cloth inside a covered bucket with a fan pushing through it, in dry heat that still buys you something. Drink water before you're thirsty. Leave a half-inch of window cracked. Know the signs. Sweating stops, skin goes hot and dry, thinking gets strange. That's the call. Make it. These methods are for people without the $300 option. That includes more people than most folks want to say out loud. What's the cheapest thing that ever got you through a bad night in the heat? If you've been out there, in a car, on pavement, in a doorway in August, tell me what you did. I read everyone. Stay cool, stay sharp, and remember. The people the world walks past know things the rest of us forgot.